as a person in his personal life. Andrew is married and the father of 3. He's the author of 2 children's books, which I would love to hear about sometime, and 2 art history books, as well as several Mystech study guides. So this evening, Andrew will speak to us about Michael, and I don't have the title exactly here, but and our relationship to Christ, or his relationship to Christ. So welcome, Andrew, and thank you for being with us again this year.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. That was a wonderful introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here. Many of you probably know that it was in this time of Michaelmas that Steiner gave most of his lectures on technology. And just a little aside of something, I mentioned this probably to some of you before, but when I was at Emerson College for their foundation year in 78, 79, my other classmates figured out that I was working for IBM in the computer field. And I can remember after several lectures, people coming up to me and going, "How can you be working for Ahriman? Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" And so I had some conversations with John Davey, who pointed me towards Dante and how one has to enter the skin of the dragon to make changes. And he told me that every field, we need anthroposophists within it. So I'm going to screen share here, and let's get this rolling. Sorry, it takes a few moments to get this all set up. Okay, and I think you all see this quite well now. I'm just having a little trouble. There we go, I think so. Okay, so I also wanted, you mentioned Brian Gray coming up, and I highly encourage all of you to attend what they're doing. It was one of the highlights of the Mystech conference when Brian and Robert Chiapacasa and David Tresimer spoke, and I'm sure this will be fantastic what they bring. So I was fortunate also today to hear Peter Sell give his Michaelmas address. As he was, I'm also filled with enthusiasm tonight. You can see I have my warm red Michaelmas shirt on, and I guess I'm raring to go despite the fact that it's past my bedtime already. So I'm going to start with a question. How often do you hear, "We certainly do live in challenging times"? Each of us should be asking, what is my role in these challenging times? Oh, and I must add, we have a special guest with us tonight who insisted on being a panelist with me. Let me introduce you to Ari Ahriman. Oh, I forgot my hat. Oh, geez. Oh, well, I'll have to hold my voice for you. He told me that he wanted to keep things honest here. While we might feel challenged by our times, have you ever thought how Michael himself feels today? Here's a quote: "We can behold Michael filled with anxiety. Will he really be able to master the dragon in the long run? You see, Ahriman is a higher being than Michael, who is an archangel, actually sort of an archangel or an archai in training right now. He sees that the power of the spiritual, he, meaning Michael, sees that the power of the spiritual sun shines upon our souls. Christ himself is working, but we are not yet able to perceive his presence. The power of the consciousness soul holds sway in the body, but it as yet will not enter our souls. It is possible that the forces of illusion in humans will give the dragon so much power that it will be impossible for Michael to maintain the balance. Michael today stands on the dragon. Mankind should one day as well, but will we? Often we see Michael depicted with a scale, but here we see a spear in his hand. What do you suppose it symbolizes? Notice the faces of each archangel. How would you feel if you came face to face with this Michael? Does his gaze see into your soul? Our human soul, should it be more active between spirit and earth? As Michaelmas, at this time, we should ask, what is my role in these challenging times? What if I do nothing? How would Michael view that? Here you see Michael with the scale weighing the souls of people. So we ask, to what state are we trying to evolve to? When your soul is weighed, will you prove to have helped this to be achieved? There would be nothing worse than saying, I want to go back to normal, or how things were before COVID or whatever. When I was comfortable, it was easygoing. While most of us quickly realize, sometimes with a groan, we can't go back to the old normal. Only a few know what they need to do in order to change the world for human evolution. In lecture 2 of the cycle From Jesus to Christ, Steiner spoke of the goal of anthroposophy towards this evolution. The essential point is that through a special kind of moral and spiritual culture, the ordinary interweaving of the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the ego must be changed. Those directions which are given for the training of the moral feelings, as also those directions for the concentration in thinking and in meditation. All this makes finally for one goal of loosening the spiritual texture which binds together the physical and etheric bodies, so that the etheric body does not remain so firmly fitted into the physical body as it naturally is. All of our meditative exercises strive after this lifting out, this loosening of the etheric body, thereby a new union between the astral body and the etheric body is brought about. Our guest has a comment about this. Yes, Ari. Normally, Lucifer is correctly cited for leading meditants away from the earth. But I hope you realize from this quote, what is so dangerous about anthroposophy, namely its meditations. When you do these meditations, you are loosening your etheric body. What are the consequences? Well, it's the withering of your physical body wherever your etheric has been loosened. I have several scientists working on how we can come up with mechanical replacement parts for withered human body parts. However, we are not ready, but my team is working on it. Thank you, Ari. Okay, let's continue. Growing up, did you ever hear these words? Hey kid, we're counting on you today. Today, the words become, it all depends on you. This is what the spiritual world is saying to each of us right now. This should lead us to ask, what is my role in these challenging times? This is the season for riddles. Even the name Michael is itself a question, for it means, who is like God? Normally, at a Michaelmas festival, you'll hear how at this time of year, as nature dies back in preparation for winter, humanity stands apart. We are faced with a riddle. What are we humans? It is a question that naturally arises in this season. What other deep questions do you have? To whom do you ask them? There is great power in riddles. I have a question to make. It's fine to have questions as long as these questions turn to science for their answers. What is absolutely silly is to hope that some spiritual being is going to swoop down here into the physical and rescue anyone. So if you have any serious questions, I'm here. I'm the best one to come to for real answers. Or today, we can turn to spiritual science for the answers. But thank you for your offer, Ari. Now let's continue. With our body, we are an island in the physical. Are we with our soul? I think today we worry far more about our body than about our soul. Despite what my esteemed guest here might say, it behooves us anthroposophists to become more aware of our soul. Steiner explains how this can be done, even for us materialists. By the way, that is Michael at the top of this tower, and you can see him now. So I'm going to give you a quote from A Road to Self-Knowledge. When the soul enjoys any event, at the moment of enjoyment, it actually is joy. Joy experiences itself in the soul. The soul is one with its experience of the world. It does not experience itself as something separate, which feels joy or admiration or delight or satisfaction or fear. It actually is joy or admiration or delight or satisfaction or fear. If the soul would always admit this fact, then and only then would those occasions appear in the right light when the soul retires from the experience of the outer world to contemplate itself by itself. These moments would then appear as forming a life of quite a special character, which at once shows itself to be entirely different from the ordinary life of the soul. It is with this special kind of life that the riddles of the soul's existence begin to dawn upon our consciousness. And these riddles are, in fact, the source of all riddles of the world. For two worlds, an outer and an inner, present themselves to the spirit of man. And the soul, for a longer or shorter time, will cease to be one with the outer world and then withdraws into the loneliness of its own existence, where it can experience itself. You see, quotes like that show just how wasteful such soul thinking is. It is even harmful because as one spends time on such silly things, real work isn't getting done. Thus, I think we should vaccinate everyone at a young age so that no one ever is inclined to think like this. Well, Ari, you're right that materialism has led to fewer and fewer humans wondering about their soul. not so long ago, most humans wondered what will happen to their soul when their body dies. Religion stepped up to answer this question, but that had been a riddle since Egyptian times. That was back in the third post-Atlantean cultural age, and I'm going to use the word Paka going forward. So our age is the fifth Paka. The fourth Paka was the middle. Thus, our cultural age is the mirror of the Egyptian age, with its practices of mummification that has led to the materialism we live with today. Between our age and the Egyptian lay the mystery of Golgotha, when Christ overcame death. Now, what should happen in this fifth Paka? And are we humans supposed to bring this change about, or are we waiting for the gods? You see, or you will see, it is indeed up to you and me. No one else and no God is going to do this for us, or it will violate our freedom. To help us realize this, Steiner offered these words. The messenger will be Michael, who is now the ambassador, that is, the countenance of Christ. Just as he once led human souls towards an understanding of Christ's life as he descended to the earth, so he is now preparing humanity to experience the emergence of Christ consciousness from the realm of the unknown into the realm of the known. And just as at the time of Christ's earthly life, the greater number of Christ's contemporaries were incapable of believing what a stupendous event had taken place in earthly evolution, so in our own day, the outer world is striving to increase the power of materialism. They will continue for a long time to regard what has been spoken of in this talk as so much fantasy, dreaming, and perhaps even outright folly. Yes, the world does need to see such things as fantasy and outright folly. Who here has ever had a real experience of this archangel Michael, or this so-called etheric Christ? Well, Ari, that's because in order to get real knowledge, to do the work necessary for all of humanity, we will need to approach and cross that abyss which lies between the world in which our bodies live and that world in which we have our true being, our humanity. You are correct in that we currently don't derive knowledge from it today. This world of the senses demands our intense attention. But when we look down at the lowest creature and up at the twinkling stars, riddles arise. Is my body derived from these kingdoms of nature? Is my soul? We come to deeply feel in our soul the cosmic importance and the majesty of all that we experience with our senses, but we feel it does not answer for us who we were, who we are, and who we will become. You are all descended from apes. You are the naked ape. And I might add, in the beginning was the Big Bang. Our true, highest human self cannot be found in all the kingdoms of nature. It is nowhere in the sunlit, shining world. You see, we are all cosmic beings here on earth. What is beyond that abyss lies the world from which we originate. Only it appears to us now as the blackest darkness. But each of us would know this world if we did not lose consciousness every night when we fall asleep. You see, only when we reach full maturity may we consciously enter this realm. Otherwise, it would do great harm to us, while at the same time, we would pollute that higher world. So there is a guardian there to prevent us from entering immaturely. This guardian is the first spiritual being we meet if we have the earnest will to enter the world of our origin. Does this guardian have anything to do with your archangel, Michael? Do you not know that I am a higher being than your Michael? I have power to give you experiences of the spiritual. Yes, we know that. Because of your immense power, that is why we need help from beings higher than us. I was about to say, this maturity is coming to the realization that my true I am is not my body, but my soul and spirit. I am a cosmic being who is here on earth for a cosmic purpose. Both the cosmic and the earthly are important, but to enter the spiritual world of our origin, we must learn to be able to shed all earthly thought forms. I'll repeat that, to shed all earthly thought forms. Today, only study of spiritual science can properly prepare us. You again are making or talking nonsense. Matter is all that matters, and matter is composed of atoms, and matter has 4 states: solid, liquid, gaseous, and plasma. But it is all still atoms. Temperature alone determines when matter enters from one state to another. If these scientists had said, instead of temperature, different conditions of warmth cause such transitions, then these 4 states of matter would be far more similar to the 4 elements known to spiritual science. Well, we disagree, but you did not say yet if you agree with the Big Bang. Many concepts of science today are tantalizingly close to those of spiritual science, and yet so far. An example is the astrophysics branch of metallicity, which postulates that there must have been 3 prior solar systems for the periodic chart to exist. The first solar system after the Big Bang would have been comprised of only hydrogen and helium. Then it would have ended with a supernova that would have fused together these elements to form the various gases. Next, another solar system ending with a supernova led to the elements that dissolve in water. Finally, a third stellar evolution ending with a supernova gave us the heavy metals. These prior solar systems roughly, very roughly, correspond to old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, and now here we are on Earth. Earth recapitulated these 3 prior conditions before it could realize its purpose and properties. These prior 3 are known as epochs called Polaris, Hyperborea when the sun separated from the Earth, and Lemuria when the moon separated. These recapitulations comprise the beginning chapter of Genesis in the Old Testament. During these ancient times of the Old Testament, people knew that the human being is in the environment of spiritual beings during one's waking hours, but that these spiritual beings were not his creator beings. Rather, they were Luciferic beings, the beings which mankind felt to be their divine creator beings. They felt were active within them from the moment of falling asleep to awakening. In fact, they also felt these divine beings active in that part of one's nature which sleeps during the day. Yes, Yahweh was called the ruler of the night, and Michael was the countenance of Yahweh and was called the servant of the ruler of the night. These ancient peoples referred to Michael whenever they received a prophetic inspiration through which knowledge greater than that of the sense world was received. For Michael was also the regent of the cosmic intelligence. The power that one felt as divine, this streamed up into one's head from the night condition of the rest of one's organism. And when the initiates of this ancient time were asked about how they received divine inspirations, they answered, "The Lord, whose name is ineffable, spoke to us through his countenance." And this countenance of Yahweh they called Michael. He was that spiritual power who has belonged to the hierarchy of the archangeloi. The ancient Hebrews felt their God remaining unknown even behind the experiences of the clairvoyant. But when the clairvoyant, through the inner strength of his soul, raised himself to this godly level, then Michael spoke to him. Michael only spoke to those who were able to transport themselves into a state of consciousness different from the ordinary consciousness. Michael was then the revealer through the night. But in our age, he must become the revealer through the day. From being a spirit of night, Michael must become a spirit of day. For Michael, the mystery of Golgotha signified the transformation from the spirit of night into the spirit of day. Today, mankind must become related to him in a new way. For Michael is no longer the countenance of Yahweh. Rather, he is now the countenance of Christ. Today, we must approach the Christ impulse through Michael. In many respects, humanity has not yet struggled through to this. Humanity has retained atavistically the old qualities of perception by which Michael could be approached when he was still the intermediary of Yahweh. Thus, humanity has today a false relationship to Michael. The leading thoughts, number 105, points out it is the task of Michael to lead man back again on paths of will, whence he came down when he descended on paths of thought from the living experience of the supersensible to the experience of the world of sense. The revealer of this path of thinking was Lucifer, as the descending path was with our thinking, so the ascending path will be one of willing. And the strengthener on the path of willing is our guest here, Ahriman. Once during the second half of Old Moon, we were beings of hindrance. We were a nuisance to the angels when they were on the human stage of Old Moon. The angels Michael cast down in 1879 were these laggard angels of old moon. We must ask, did they become laggards because of us? Earth is the planet of redemption. Many laggard beings seek redemption during this second half of Earth evolution. I need to say something here. Look, way back in Eden, Lucifer grew quite proud of himself and glowed something ugly. The gods came to me to fix the mess that Lucifer had made. I made a deal with the gods. Whatever my guys create, we get it in the end. I want you to know that these gods that you think so highly of, they threw you out of Eden into free fall. If not for me and my guys, who knows where you would have ended up? Each of you were caught by one of my guys, and he's been with you ever since. Together, we took this framework from old Saturn that you call a phantom, and we filled it out for your future life on Earth. Yes, we did that. We made your nerves and senses to work properly so you could even think. No one ever thanks us for this remarkable work we did. Now it is our understanding that these gods of yours plan for you to be here only temporarily. Once you are gone, we were promised these bodies and the earth. Further, we understand that your time here is planned to end about the year 5700. We're not telling you to go. You all are welcome to stay. But can you blame us for preparing now for that which is coming, that coming change? Much about your body we will need to change, for we cannot do birth and death. So we need to make these bodies have replaceable parts so that our bodies can exist forever. You call it transhumanism. We call it necessary. Look, we've been very close all these years. We expect some cooperation before you all hightail out of here. Now, that cosmic bully you speak of, Michael, let me tell you a thing or two about him. One day around 1841, he came to a group of angels from Old Moon who were doing exactly what God had asked them to do, namely to seal off the spiritual world from you humans. They finished that job in 1250, and they were doing a very good job of maintaining it. Then one day, 1841 or so, comes this bully. And for no apparent reason, he picks a fight with them. With meanness, he bashed them until they were pushed out of their own home and fell down into your human realm. Of course they were upset. No one in heaven stopped this bullying. Because I accepted them and took them in, they now work for me. And I'm not done rounding up beings to support my future work. The elementals, as you call them, I plan to have them serving me soon too. In a way, Ari, you spoke accurately, but there is more to this story. In order to balance the presence of these laggard angels within the human realm, in 1880, Vulcan beings began to enter the same region where one finds these fallen angels, as you said. that is, in human consciousness. From Materialism and the Task of Anthroposophy, Lecture 14, we read, thus, since the 80s of the 19th century, heavenly beings are seeking to enter this earthly existence. And the first are Vulcan beings who are now actually entering this earth existence. Thus, heavenly beings are already here in our earth existence. And it is thanks to the fact that beings from beyond the earth are bringing messages down into this earthly existence that it is possible at all to have a comprehensive spiritual science today. Let me tell you something, smarty pants. You have but a mere 3,600 more years left for when you can incarnate via sexual procreation. And no, human procreation via the larynx does not replace this. That will not come until what's called the Vulcan planetary condition. So many of you have this wrong. Thus, from 6,000 to 8,000 AD, you will have to inhabit bodies built for both you and my guy, that is your double, with the help of these fallen spirits of darkness who now work for me. At that time, you will view your nearly mechanical physical body much like you do your automobile today. This will be an important process for you as well as for me and my guys. Ari, we agree on this. And Steiner tells us this is very important for us to know because we must help the Vulcan beings prepare exactly this future. While your beings will incorporate into the body machines that can do immoral deeds, these Vulcans will help us to build similar machines, but those that will only do moral deeds. This will be during the 7th post-Atlantean cultural age, the so-called American Paka. At its end, there will be the war of all against all, and then the return of the moon. It is incumbent on us to begin today the process of loosening the etheric within the physical through meditation, through eurythmy, and other anthroposophical practices. Christ is in the etheric to show us the way. If we cannot overcome materialism, then we will be destined to remain with your guy and your horde on a dead earth. It takes moral courage in our will to choose the path that Michael is pointing us to, the path that Christ is. This timeline shows future events. In red, you see the start and end dates for the remaining post-Atlantean cultural ages. In green, the start of the 6th epoch. I've tried to indicate approximately where some future events will occur. While not in your lifetime, it is nonetheless your future that is being prepared now. This future is not so far away. Christ is now revealing our next stage where our lowest bodily member is the etheric. We need to prepare now for the end of sexual procreation, for throughout this 7th Paka, we will need to rely upon the fallen spirits of darkness, as you heard, to keep our presence on the physical earth going. We've heard that during this Paka, some advanced humans will be able to leave their physical body behind and move on to life in the etheric. And some humans will continue to embrace materialism and find foolishness in spiritual concepts. and thus they will freely choose to remain with the physical. The double will take on the abandoned physical bodies, but they will not be able to maintain its form, for that form was given to us by the exousiae. They will fall. Steiner calls this the second fall, for ours was the first. From human form, they will become spidery in their form and cover the earth. As this is happening, the great war of all against all will bring to an end all human existence in physical bodies. Soon after this catastrophe, the moon will physically return and reunite with the evolving earth. So the seventh Paka will be the time of the separation of the sheep and goats. Christ leads by example. Michael points for us the way. We will come to experience our physical body as we do a vehicle out of which we can pull our etheric body at will. You will leave behind your body for your double because you are a cosmic being becoming an angel. As an angel, you won't have a physical body. So I've prepared two graphs to help us review the key points you've heard. By the way, in this graph, the first and last epochs are not shown. Hyperborea recapitulated Old Sun. This was when Lucifer was able to influence human evolution and caused a change in our planned path of evolution that required Ahriman to be brought fully into this drama. The recapitulation of Old Moon was in the Lemurian epic, when the physical body was prepared with the help of the Ahrimanic beings who became our double. Then the Atlantean epic was the first fully earthly epic. At its midpoint, humans stepped out for the first time upon solid ground and sexual procreation began. Here you see in blue the intended path of our evolution. We would have been beings that circled around the earth. Because of Eden, we fell, the first fall, to the black curve. Now we are approaching, and it has already begun, when we, out of freedom, decide our future, to follow the path of Christ or to remain with the physical and thereby fall with our double, or perhaps to remain human. So that leads us to the question, what is my role in these challenging times? That question should now arise again. Can we think like Michael? I will close now with a passage from the mission of the Archangel Michael, and you can read along. The true anthroposophist must be conscious that the need today is to look with active participation and to cooperate in the battle between Ahriman and Michael. To know oneself in the very midst of this battle, this decisive conflict between Michael and Ahriman, is one thing that lies inherent in true anthroposophical enthusiasm and inspiration. And quoting further, I will characterize more precisely what it means to think in the sense of Michael, to think Michaelically. You see, my dear friends, if you confront your fellow man today, you actually confront him with a completely materialistic consciousness. You say to yourselves, this is a man of flesh and blood. This is a man of earth substances. But this is justified only in regard to the mineral kingdom. That which fills the form as mineral substance is what you see with your physical eyes. the human being who does the building you do not see. You speak correctly only if you say to yourself, what confronts me here are the particles of matter which the human spirit shape stores up in itself. This makes the invisible being which stands here before me visible. As you are sitting here, all of you are invisible to physical senses. A certain number of shapes are sitting here. They have, through a certain inner power of attraction, collected particles of matter. These particles of matter are what we see. We merely see the mineral. The real human beings that are sitting here are invisible. They are supersensible. To say this to oneself with full consciousness at every moment of waking life constitutes the Michaelic mode of thinking. To cease conceiving of the human being as a conglomerate of mineral particles which he but arranges in a certain way, as is also assumed of animals and plants, and from which only the minerals are accepted. And to become conscious of this fact that we walk among invisible human beings, this means to think Michaelically. So with that, we can take up your questions now. And I have posed some for you. Why must Yahweh need a countenance? Likewise, why does Christ? Is the face of an organization similar to this? What will our face be like in the sixth epoch? So I will stop screen sharing. And I guess if you want to use chat to pose any thoughts or questions, or you can raise your hands. I'm going to have a drink. Well, thank you all.
There's so much. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if the illnesses that we are all going through is a part of loosening the etheric. Is there a connection there? The blessings of illness, is that a part of what's necessary for this activity of loosening the etheric body?
You know, that's a wonderful question. Is that from Helena? Yes, hi. You know, Steiner doesn't, that I have found, so I would have to conjecture. I don't think Steiner actually answered that question in what I read, but I would have to assume so. He talks about many new illnesses and therefore the need to develop a hygienic occultism. So in this lecture 3 from the Challenge of the Times, he talks about 3 occultisms that will have to be developed. And Cynthia mentioned one, the mechanical occultism here in the West, and in the Far East or in Russia, a eugenic occultism. And unfortunately, that word eugenic now has a wrong connotation today, but this is how to bring the right forces to bear for an incarnating individual. And then the hygienic occultism. And I think that hygienic occultism has to do with these new illnesses that will manifest. Now, Steiner also talks about new organs that will be developed. And he talks about an organ in the brain that will come about that will enable us to remember our previous incarnations. And he said, when people don't use this, it will develop as a kind of illness. If you don't use an organ of the ones that we know about today, it will cause an illness. So he says in the same way. Natalie, did you have a question? Or is that just okay? Ted, go for it.
Andrew, I was so glad to see you mention the road to self-knowledge because I've recently been grappling with that. And you read some of it, but one of the things that struck me was that you are joy, and only afterwards, when you reflect on it, when you sort of bring in the thinking or you so on. But in your graph, you showed thinking just previous to the fall and then willing to bring us out of the fall. So in this description of Steiner's of you are joy, and he says you have to, I'm trying to think, you don't censor the joy, but you have to be sort of in your higher self to really experience it, I guess. So two questions come up. Is this willing that you have to practice? Will you be able to do this at the same time? You know, in other words, you don't want to kill the soul by not having the experience, but at the same time, to truly have the experience and not have it like a drug where you're not conscious. Are you getting what I'm saying?
So let me first of all mention that what I read from Road to Self-Knowledge was about the soul. It's actually in the meditation to do with the body.
Right.
And so it's interesting, but he's talking about not the body, soul, and spirit, but just the soul there, that it is joy, and that joy experiences itself in the soul. So it's not in the body that it's experiencing itself. The body reflects this. And so we become conscious of it just as we do our thoughts through the reflection of the body. Okay, now this graph I showed, this descent that was led by Lucifer of our thinking is, thinking through this was led down into the physical by Lucifer. It was thinking when we experienced spiritual beings all around us, was a thinking in the ego realm. And then thinking descended to the astral realm. And there we experienced the inspiration from spiritual beings. Then it descended into the etheric, and there we experienced the manifestations of the spiritual world. And then it descended into the physical, where all we can experience is the wrought works. But essentially, we're led to, there is no spiritual world in order to develop our freedom, which we now have. And so now we have to be applying that freedom in our will. And this is where we meet Ahriman, who will strengthen us so that we don't become wimpy angels when this is done.
A follow-up, if I may. Whoops.
Go ahead.
Now, you're confusing me a little bit. First of all, anthroposophy is a thinking path. But the way you're sort of saying thinking leads us to hell is what I guess you're saying.
No, I'm not saying it leads us to hell. It led us to where we could develop freedom.
Okay, I agree. So thinking is not a bad thing. So once you get the freedom, then you start applying the will. Okay, I get you. Thank you.
Right. But you need the thinking as well. You've got to apply the willing into the thinking. That's the first place we start.
The way you presented Ahriman in this presentation, I believe for all of us, gave us a different relationship to Ahriman, and I'm deeply grateful.
I'm glad to hear that. I meant to have a little, hat and guise to allow me to step into the role, and then I forgot to bring it. So, but I'm glad I could change my voice enough so you knew which character I was trying to speak. Yeah. You know that Steiner's often spoke about evil, and he gave us quite a different picture than most of us got from our religious education.
I asked a question about the countenance of Christ is Michael, but Prokofiev talks about the countenance as being Vidar. Can you explain this time frame of Michael moving from an archangel to an archai, and this whole thing with the countenance of Christ, the two of them?
I'll try, Shani. When an archangel, when one of the seven archangels that assumes the role of time spirit, the time spirits are the archai. The word in the beginning, the Greek word, is a derivation of this word archai. And they actually mean the spirits of primal beginnings. And so they were the creators of time. An archangel, when they're the time spirit, steps up as a kind of archai in training. But this is Michael's last time as an archai in training. He does not go back to being an archangel after this. So there's been a number of people who have tried, who've asked the question, well, if that's the case, who becomes Michael's replacement among those seven? And quite a few people, through some things that were written down by students of Steiner, have concluded that it is this Vidar, and who is an archangel and will take the place of Michael. I can't confirm that, but if you know Ari Thorson, he has a book coming out about that. He has been a proponent of that, and believes he has quite a bit of personal as well as Steiner indications to conclude that. So thank you for that question. It is an important one. And I guess I didn't quite answer the question of countenance. I tried to pose it to all of you, but it's wonderful to read what Steiner had to say about the descent of Christ from the sun to the earth. And it's through all of these layers of the hierarchy. And within each layer, and being isn't identified in each of these, the Christ being has to put this sheath on, has to be in that layer, that level of consciousness where it is being. And so it shouldn't surprise us that a being becomes that which a lower layer can see the Christ. So in this sense, this is what is meant by the countenance. But I think there's actually more than that. Michael is known to have a certain gaze. It's a gaze that we saw in some of those paintings. It's a gaze which, when you look at those paintings, you feel, oh my, he's looking right into my soul. He can see my soul. And that's a kind of disturbing feeling, because in our physical bodies, we know we can hide our inner being, our moral being. Yes, sometimes when we're embarrassed by something, our countenance will show that embarrassment. And yes, your mom could read whenever you were lying to her. But in general, we can hide. But there's this feeling, no, you can't hide from Michael. And so I think that's true, that countenance Christ uses at this time. And I think that's, in a way, that's preparation for what's coming. I asked this question about the sixth epoch. And in that sixth epoch, when we no longer have physical bodies, where etheric will be our lowest bodily member, we will no longer be able to hide. What we are morally will be visible to all. And Steiner also goes further to say, what is moral in a person will then be deemed beautiful, and what is immoral in a person will be deemed to be ugly. But at that time, people will call what is ugly beautiful, and what is beautiful ugly. And I think we're seeing the beginnings of that already. Any other questions?
Go ahead, Victoria.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for your presentation. And this is a very personal question. I chose very consciously not to get the injection. And then I got COVID. So that's what I mean by this is very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout that experience of having the virus, and I've never put it this way before until your lecture tonight, my physical body was absolutely not obliterated, but it was not available to me at all. And because of that, I had certain experiences that will be with me for the rest of my life, spiritual experiences that I know I never would have received if I had gotten the injection. That would have been withheld from me because the injection stops that experience of illness. Does that make sense to you so far?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I had the illness. And I'm wondering, it's the first time I've thought about it this way. I'm wondering if what I experienced was a loosening of the etheric. Does that make sense?
Yes, it certainly does.
And I haven't understood it that way, but how this shot, this injection that people are getting can prevent that. Now, I know my whole experience was a shutting down of the physical. But I'm wondering if that's the only way that etheric can loosen from the physical, is that the physical has to, in a way, I'm just going to quote, I have to decrease so that Christ might increase.
Mhm.
So I know I'm putting it in a very maybe awkward way, but I'm thinking about that out of your presentation tonight.
Well, thank you, Victoria. It's very insightful what you said. As you probably know, in ancient times, in the ancient mysteries, when a person went through initiation, they were put into a death-like state for 3.5 days.
That's where I was, 3 days. Yeah.
And during that period of time, like you, the etheric body was loosened.
Yeah.
In fact, you can't really say it was taken completely out of the body, but it was in a certain sense, because the etheric doesn't obey spatial dimensions. So in these ancient times, the etheric body was lifted out, and then the person could have these spiritual experiences. This is what Ari Thorson, he had it twice. Or he had at least COVID once, because he's got the antibodies, and maybe a flu the second time, but both of them nearly killed him. And he said both times he had spiritual experiences. And I won't ruin his forthcoming book or whatever, but so yes, in a sense, the shot or the injection, the vaccine, will keep you from having that near-death experience.
Yeah.
But I can't say that we should encourage people to have near-death experiences. I think that a number of people won't get through their near-death experiences and will die. So that's not really moral on our part to do it that way. And the other thing is that when somebody goes through the injection, they're going through a process themselves until, and it's more than a bodily process. I don't know if you know the name Adriana Coulias over in Australia, but she's been writing some about what is a virus, and which I think you're also hinting at. But there are questions then about what is affected by an injection. You know, and today we're nowhere close to having an injection that, and people have wrongly quoted Steiner to say, eliminate the soul. But what Steiner did say is to cause people not to have the inclination to entertain concepts of the soul, to keep us totally materialistic in everything that we think about. That's what Steiner said in that quote. You know, I did get the vaccine. And with the second Moderna shot, I did have a problem with it. And I didn't have your experience, but I had brain fog that lasted about 3 months after having it. And I hope it's gone now. It seems to be, but it affected me all summer. And the only thing that's sort of lingering from that is a mild case of vertigo.
Well, Andrew, what I would want to share with you is I would never, ever want to have eliminated the experience I went through. by having a shot.
Mhm.
Never. The experiences that I had will be with me for my life, and they were spiritual experiences. But it's so hard to say that.
Mhm.
People think, oh, you were hallucinating, and oh, you hadn't eaten for so many days, or all of these different things. And it's like, no, somehow the blessing of this virus, and I consider it a blessing, the blessing of having the virus allowed something to come to me that never would have been able to come to me otherwise,
Mhm.
because we're in a physical body and it can't get through. So that's just my experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Well, I'm glad you're here with us, Victoria.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat, Andrew. Do you see that?
Okay, let me look here. I'm gonna see if I can move this so I can read more of it. Matthew, I have a question. I have used plant medicines in different settings, and I thoroughly relate to the separation of the etheric from the physical with the effect of these plants molecules. I think it's an important area of research, especially if our future is dependent on this loosening. If the vaccine prevents the loosening, there are plants that can help in the process of doing it. Shouldn't they be considered spiritual technologies? If by plants you mean things like mushrooms, I would, perhaps you know Carlos Castaneda's books, and there was a time that those books brought many from the hippie era to the spiritual awakening. And if it can do that to start on a spiritual path, then fine. But I would say that the danger of such an approach is that it can lead, and I'm speaking without experience. I want you to know I have not done these sort of things. But from what I can tell, it leads to individual spiritual experiences. It is not something which leads to spiritual experiences that can then be a part of a spiritual science. And it is that spiritual science that we need to develop. I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for, but yeah. So I see Leon has his hand up. Leon, you're in mute. Can you unmute? And Victoria, you could drop your hand unless you have another question.
Okay. You and Victoria both used the shot. And as a graduate of Oxford, I learned a lot about how that particular vaccine was developed. And it's a traditional vaccine, and it was developed for the world. The ones that we're familiar with in the United States were basically developed for developed nations and not for the world. They weren't developed at a cost that was affordable. And so I want to suggest that it was an ethical difference in the creation of these substances, which I don't necessarily see in the American vaccines. They're commercial enterprises, and they're very different from traditional vaccines.
Yeah, they are very different, as you point out. Probably everybody here knows that it's a new way with messenger RNA, and this messenger RNA causes cells near where the injection is to respond with these spike proteins, and these spike proteins then create an environment in which similar antibodies are created that if you do get the COVID, it can then deal with it, something of this nature. But you're right, because of the temperatures at which these have to be refrigerated, it's nearly impossible to bring those type of vaccines. So there are other ones that are the traditional vaccines, such as Sputnik in Russia and some of the other ones in Brazil and so on.
You know, it's, Andrew is coming to us from the East Coast. And if we look at our clocks, it's 20 after 11 in his time zone.
Thank you.
So dear friends, I think you'll all join me. Maybe you can put your thank yous in the chat for him to read, and he can see them afterwards as well. And Andrew, I think we all are extremely grateful to you for this wonderful evening, creatively done with Ahriman and Michael both appearing. So thank you for all of that. And good night to you. Thank you so much. And I hope anyone who wants more of Andrew will find him on Mistech.
That's right. Or Anthroposophy and Mechanical Occultisms, another Facebook group. Or Anthroposophy. Thank you all. This was wonderful. I'm going to go sleep now. Good night.
Thank you
Good
so
night.
much. Thank you.
Bye.